What's up, guys? Chris Irvin, the ketologist, coming at you from Austin, Texas again. This video is about the 3 most common misconceptions about a ketogenic diet. So I've been in the keto space for a little over 4 years now. I started my ketologist page on Instagram a little over 3 years ago now. And one of the luxuries that I have from having this ketologist page is that I get a ton of questions coming in through my DMs or coming in through opportunities that I post on my story for people to ask questions. And it allows me to kind of get a pulse on what are the things that people need to know about keto, or what are the most common things that people are asking, or what are the things that people are confused about. And when it comes to misconceptions, there are 3 really big ones that I have found over the last 3 years that they just haven't changed. These are the 3 things that people are always either have wrong or misunderstanding about, or there's conflicting information out there on the internet about it. So I'm gonna address those 3 things in this video. So the first one is that protein is bad and we need to limit it on keto. And let me kind of give you the reason why we think this. So there's this process that occurs in our body known as gluconeogenesis. And this process, to kind of break it down, it's a very complex process. I'm not going to go really crazy into the biochemistry. I'm going to give you a very basic, easy to understand definition. So what happens is with gluconeogenesis is that our body can make glucose or blood sugar out of non-carbohydrate substrates. So normally we eat carbohydrates get broken down into glucose, we have glucose in the blood. Gluconeogenesis is making that glucose from other things. So it can make it from the amino acids that are found in protein, and it can make it from like the glycerol backbone that comes from fatty acids. That's going a little bit science heavy into this, but the point is that there's this process in place that our body can make glucose. And because it can make glucose from amino acids, which come from protein, people fear that if you have too much protein, that excess protein is going to be converted into glucose in the blood through gluconeogenesis. So this is where this fear of having too much protein comes into play. The other reason why we have this fear is because when the ketogenic diet was first invented, which was back in the 1920s, it was invented to mimic fasting for children who were suffering from drug-resistant epilepsy. That's what our macronutrients for keto at that time were pretty low protein. The recommendation was like 20 to 25% of your calories coming from protein. So putting these 2 things together, we've ended up putting this huge restriction on protein intake on a ketogenic diet. And I think that we have done ourselves a disservice in doing so. So protein is obviously very important and it's something that we need. And let's kind of debunk some of these things that people think when it comes to like gluconeogenesis. So the thing that's important to know about this gluconeogenesis is that it is a demand-driven process, which means that it is not a supply-driven process. So what that means is that having excess protein does not just mean that it's going to be converted into glucose. Your body has this process of gluconeogenesis because it needs to. It's actually a great thing. You've probably noticed that when you've started a ketogenic diet that your blood sugar doesn't go to 0 when you stop eating carbohydrates. The reason why it doesn't is because of gluconeogenesis. And the reason why this is important is because there are certain cells in our body that can't use fat and ketones for energy, and we're not providing glucose to our body when we're consuming a keto diet. So we have to have this process of gluconeogenesis. So like red blood cells and even certain portions of our brain, they can only use glucose for energy. But the good news is that we don't have to eat glucose, or carbohydrates that is, to get this glucose. We can actually just use this process known as gluconeogenesis to create it. So rather than this being something that we should be fearing, it's something that we should be thankful for, because it means that we can supply our body with what it needs without having to consume a lot of carbohydrates and kick ourselves out of ketosis. So the reason why we should be focusing on higher protein intake, so that kind of tells you why we don't need to be fearful of protein, but the reason why we need to be focusing on higher protein intake is because we have higher protein demands, especially if we're exercising. So a study that came out last year, I believe it was in like November or December of last year, found that men and women put on a ketogenic diet for 12 weeks who were exercising but only eating 20% of their calories from protein ended up losing muscle mass. And that's because if you're exercising, you have a greater protein demand than what this traditional ketogenic diet says for us. We have to remember that when the ketogenic diet was invented for epilepsy, that was for a much different cause than what it was invented for now. And it's okay for us to kind of update our thinking and update our approach when we're trying to meet different goals. So if you are working out, chances are you're going to need more protein, and it's something that you need to focus on. So it's important to know that it's not going to be harmful to your state of ketosis in doing so. The second most common misconception about a ketogenic diet is that higher fat is better. So kind of a lot to unpack with this, but because keto is a low carb diet and we focused on low protein, like I just mentioned, it's caused a lot of people to just assume that it is a very high fat diet and it's something that, that's how it needs to be done. We have to be consuming 70 to 75+% of our calories from fat. And that's what people are doing. So that's having, people are dousing everything in oil. People are trying to consume the fattiest cuts of meat. People are trying to add in fats here and there, trying to get that fat intake higher. And I'm not saying for people to lower their fat intake because fat's really important. There's a ton of nutrients that you can get from it. Most of the, whole food, high fat, most of the foods that are whole food versions that are high in fat, they're very micronutrient dense. So you're getting a ton of nutrients when you're consuming those foods. And you're making sure that you're not going into a severe calorie deficit. Fat contains 9 calories per gram, whereas protein and carbs contains 4 calories per gram. So you're getting more calories when you consume fat. So it's good that you're consuming it because you're keeping your body supplied with the energy that it needs to thrive. But that doesn't mean that we need to be going overboard and we need to be putting butter on everything and we need to be dousing everything in oil and putting salad dressings on everything. That's just not the way that it works. I think one of the biggest reasons why a lot of people are doing this is because we assume that, hey, if I want to get into a deeper state of ketosis, I can just eat more fat. Well, it actually doesn't work like that. So the only dietary fat that you can consume that is going to actually stimulate ketone production are MCTs. But the other fats that we eat don't work like that. Those fats have a higher affinity for going to our, different cells in our body and being used for energy and not going to our liver. It is the fat that is stored in our body that travels to our liver and gets converted to ketones. So that's really important to remember because if you hear people saying, you need to eat more fat on keto and they're saying that because they're trying to get into a deeper state of ketosis, that's kind of a flawed logic of thinking. So again, not saying that fat is something that we shouldn't be focusing on. Keto is a higher fat diet. Is a higher fat diet in that, we used to be eating, recommending people eating 15 to 20% of their calories from fat when we were on this low fat recommendations. So it is a higher fat diet, but that doesn't mean that needs to be the whole basis of your diet. For me, I'm kind of to the point where I don't really add that much fat in anymore. I'm just sticking to fattier cuts of meat and then having, whole food sources that have some fat in them, like mixed nuts occasionally, avocados, things like that. But really not, doing the whole butter in my coffee and dousing everything in coconut oil or anything like that. I'm just getting fats from the keto foods that I'm eating and, periodically checking in with my calories to make sure that they are in check and that I'm not under eating for a long period of time. Which brings us to our most common keto misconception number 3, which is it's all about calories. So I hear people talking about this a lot on the internet, a lot of people talking about how, the keto doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter what we eat. It matters how much we eat. Calories are the most important thing. And that's just not true, guys. And anybody that wants to, you can argue that until you're blue in the face. But the truth is that there is a difference in our metabolic state. Our metabolic state can change based on the foods that we're eating. And that can put you at a different ability to lose weight. So calories matter a lot more when you're not in a state of ketosis is kind of where I can start with this. So when you look at a lot of studies comparing different food intakes on non-ketogenic diet, or I'm sorry, not different food intakes, but rather different food type intakes. So eating, this food and that food and this food. But these studies kind of show that calories are the most important thing when it comes to weight loss. But when we start looking at keto, we see something different. So we see that people are, eating more this is in research. We've seen that people are eating more calories on a ketogenic diet compared to a non-ketogenic diet, but losing more weight. Okay, so that is kind of a telltale sign that it's not all about calories. Now, does that mean that calories don't matter? No, it does not. The problem with this debate is that people go too far in one direction and then they overcorrect in the other. So if people go, calories are the most important thing, that's not correct. Calories don't matter at all. That's also not correct. They still play a role, but it appears that they play much less of a role on a ketogenic diet. So one of the things that we know is that as your body becomes more fat adapted, we improve our mitochondrial function. And the mitochondria are the powerhouses of our cells. And one of the things that they're responsible for is metabolizing nutrients to convert it into energy for us. So if we have better functioning mitochondria, we're going to be able to burn fat better. And interestingly enough, we've also seen that there are some physiological changes in our cells when we're metabolizing ketones that actually lead to our cells being a little bit more what you would call inefficient or wasteful when it comes to burning nutrients. So most cells are going to be a little bit more tightly coupled in the fact that they are going to burn they're going to burn as much energy as they need to survive. Whereas, cells that are metabolizing a lot of ketones have actually started to show in research that these cells will burn more than what they need, which is good when it comes to us trying to burn weight or burn fat and lose weight. So there's plenty of research out there on this, guys. There's even research showing that when calories are controlled, there's a really good study published in the 70s that showed when calories are controlled, there's different weight loss at different levels of carbohydrate restriction. So I believe in this study it was like 104 carbs or something like that, 60 carbs and 30 carbs, calories the same. And there was like, it was almost like a linear response when it comes to how much weight was lost when you started restricting your carbs. So at 30 carbohydrates, you were losing significantly more fat than when you were at the 100 carbohydrates. And that's just because when we're talking about keto, guys, you are putting your body in a metabolic state that is going to induce fat burning. When insulin levels are low, your body is burning fat. When you are not consuming a ketogenic diet and you're constantly stimulating insulin, that's not the case. And under those conditions, calories matter a lot more. But on keto, they don't matter as much. So how you can take this practically is that for a lot of people, when you start ketogenic dieting, I actually don't recommend that you track right away because I don't think that you need to. I think what's most important is that you eat enough of the keto foods to keep you satisfied. And I think that you're going to see a ton of progress because for most people, whatever your diet was before was probably so poor that when you come over to keto, even if you are maybe, over consuming calories, you're probably still going to start seeing some progress. Now, over time, you may need to dial in your calories more. You may need to focus on them more. Like I said, they do play a role. So at some point you may need to put some focus on them, but they don't need to be the primary focus when it comes to figuring out what you need to be doing with your ketogenic diet. So that's it for this video, guys. That's the 3 most common misconceptions about the ketogenic diet that I've heard over the last 3-4 years in the keto space. I hope this clears up some things for you guys. If you guys learned something and if you have a family member or friends that would benefit from hearing this message, please share it with them and please subscribe to this channel. So if you are coming to this channel now, you're probably seeing that there's only a few videos up. I'm just now starting to put this focus into doing a lot more video content for you guys, and I want this channel to really be driven by your guys' feedback. So if there's topics that you want me to speak on, if there's research that you want me to dig into, anything like that, please comment them below and subscribe to the channel so you can see some new videos that I'm coming out with soon. All right, thanks a lot, guys.